Thank you guys for tuning back into Every Horror Film Where Horror is Forever. Today, we are on the Halloween train still, and we have just watched Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. And I got to tell you, I got a lot of things to say about this movie. Jeff, I know this is the probably the first or second time you've ever really seen Halloween 6. Did it hold up as well as you thought it would, or was it still a big old piece of crap?
I had a really weird and confusing experience when I watched this movie because in the third act, I got struck with this crazy case of Mandela effect. And I even had to pause the movie, look it up, and text you, like, hey, am I watching the right version? Because when I watched it, I said, like, it got to the very, very end, and the credits started rolling. And I said, that's not what I remember. Like, as a kid, I saw it. I saw it on AMC's Fear Fest or whatever it was, and I was like, "There's something missing here that we're going to talk about. There's a lot
Right.
missing that I remember from way back when that wasn't in the version." And lo and behold, it wasn't a bootleg. It was the theatrical version of this movie, which most people have seen apparently, and that's the reason that's the same one you watched. We'll talk about it, but once I got beyond that, man. Let's just say I get it, man. I get the criticisms because it's it's uh it's something, that's for sure.
I apologize. I was trying to find. I actually have the producer's cut of this film somewhere, and I don't see it, which kind of freaks me out. Hopefully, I find it eventually. Um, so yes, there are two versions of this film. You have the theatrical cut, which is primarily the one that people see, and that's the one that we watch. There is also the producer's cut. I've seen the producer's cut a couple times. We're not going to do a separate review for it. We'll just talk about it, what it's about in this review. So Halloween 6 essentially picks up 6 years after Halloween 5. Now Jamie is 16, 17, 18 years old, something like that. She's very young. And they didn't get Daniel Harris back for this role. Apparently the offer that they sent her was very minimal in terms of money, and she didn't like it. And I think she was 15 or 16 at the time. I can't remember, but she did require a permit to work longer hours on the shoot due to her age. And she had no problem acquiring that permit, but I think the studio just didn't want to go through the hassle of that. So they kind of threw
There's
her
a
good.
there's a super interesting story about that, and I just got to spit it out because not a lot of people know. Danielle
Yeah.
Harris, loved Danielle Harris. She was great in number 4. She was kind of shoehorned in number 5. She's a great actress. At the time of this movie, Danielle Harris was 17. So the producers and the directors and the studio, they didn't want to have to deal with child labor laws. She was so committed to the role of Jamie and sending off the character in the right way that she actually went to court to get like an exclusion or like a permission to get around child labor laws. And the salary that she wanted to reprise her role as Jamie in this was no more than the court costs to do so. So that's a huge, like, dude, respect points right off the bat. Like, you're so dedicated that you'll go to court on your own money and only ask for that money and payment and no more. And just to be in the movie and send off the character in the right way, and the studio didn't even want to like honor that. That was really awesome. Maybe like Danielle Harris even more. Very cool story. But of course, she got recast because the studio did not want to pay her what she asked for, which was very, very minimal, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you jumped in and clarified that. I knew it was something like that. So the fact that you have a character who is the focal point of 4 and 5, which, for the most part, everyone pretty much likes 4. Not a lot of people like 5, but there's some fans of it. But to come into 6 to kind of do that the third part of the Thorn Trilogy, if you want to call it, and to be lowball with an offer like that, and even go through the links to do what you had to do to get on the movie, and they didn't care. That's a bad look for Halloween 6. Now,
It's not the only bad look for Halloween 6. Let's put it that way.
It's not, unfortunately. There was also was lots of production hell on this film, and they actually went through a lot of trouble of trying to come up with a name for this film. Obviously, they settled on the Curse of Michael Myers, but they were talking about doing Halloween 666. Even you know, I think at one point it was, I can't remember if this was for Resurrection or not, so I don't want to say if it was michaelmyers.net. I can't remember. I mean, there were a lot of bad names that they threw across for this film here. Eventually, they settled on Halloween 6, and this came very close to going straight to video, because this was produced and sent out by Miramax under Dimension Films by the Weinstein Company. So this came very close to going to straight to DVD, but it didn't, or VHS at the time. So overall, this film essentially takes place. Jamie, we get opened up to this lady being rushed out by these paramedics that we think about, or these doctors down this hallway. The girl that is there, that is Jamie Lloyd, is not played by Danielle Harris. It's played by J.C. Brandy, who's a different actress. So they didn't get her back, obviously, and you don't really know that until later on in the film. Whenever it's, oh, that's Jamie, you're like, oh, that's her. Okay, it's a different actress. And she essentially has this baby, and we don't not really sure why. And then all of a sudden, Michael appears, and he's chasing after her, wanting her child. And that's pretty much what we have here, is Michael continuing to try to kill his bloodline. But this is when the cult of Thorn comes full circle, and they really get into the why and how Michael is controlled, and he is what makes him work, and the new family that's in the house. The little boy hears the same voices that Michael heard. And I got to tell you, man, when I watched this film when I was younger, I was really scared by it, because to me, this is a good version of Michael in terms of the mask and the way he looks. But this film has not aged well for me at all. And so far, out of all the movies we watched, this has probably been my least favorite, unfortunately. I hate saying that, because I used to like this movie a lot, but it was tough. It was tough getting through this movie.
Yeah, I like it better than five. I don't know why, but I really just don't like number five. It really just, it's like nails on a chalkboard, but for my eyes. And I don't really know why, but number six is a little more enjoyable to me to watch. I think it's put together a little better. I think it's shot a little better. You brought up a good point last time. Michael Myers is way more threatening this time around, and just the shots of him stalking across the street, and the trick-or-treating, and the hiding in the shadows when you look out the window, like those nice little callbacks to number one. I think that's what five was lacking. So this is a little bit more fun to watch than number five, and that's only in like the first half. But the elephant in the room with this movie is the story. Is where the filmmaking gets a couple points, the story absolutely just obliterates it. Like, there's no way around it. This is a bad story. This is not a good story. It's not. Not only is it not believable, but it's very like offensive to the longtime fans. It's just very. It kind of just. It neuters Michael Myers is what it does, in making him like this victim of this cult rather than what he is, which is, what is he? But to be the victim of this cult and just like puppet stringed along to do these murders, not a good story, man. I mean, it doesn't matter how good they did it. This isn't a case of it's a great story, it just wasn't, delivered well. It's not a great story, and you can deliver it perfectly. It's not good. It will never be good.
Correct. I agree. Real quick before we go on, can you turn up your volume some? It kind of went down. I don't know if
You can't hear me?
it's not as well. Looks like it kind of went down.
Headphones.
We're doing something funky. Let me see.
That's better. There we go.
Hold on.
You're good.
Technical difficulties.
Wait. Hang on.
How about now?
Yep, that's good. You're good.
All right, then.
Cool.
No headphones today, I guess. Whatever. Can't save me from the curse of Michael Myers.
So as you were saying throughout the film, the story is just so convoluted. In 5, I'd stand on an island by myself in that part that I think, while the story isn't great, there's elements that they tried that I think could have been done better. In this movie, just having them controlled by a cult and being controlled by a person, it's one thing to maybe have someone that is like the Man in Black in 5 that's interested in Michael and wants to see him out in the world, than it is to have him controlled by this cult and just make him being this kind of puppet, I guess. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me at all. And it just there's some things I like about this movie, don't get me wrong. And I like Michael's mask in this film. I think it's one of the best. I like it. I like the look. I like the way he maneuvers, the way he walks is fine. I think they do an okay job of the atmosphere we do see. It does feel like Halloween at some points in this film. I like that. But also you get Paul Rudd in this movie, which is pretty cool. His first actual on-screen appearance in a film. So I wonder if anyone's ever gone to a convention where they're like talking about Ant-Man or something. They're like, "Yo, what about Halloween 6?"
Yeah. Paul Rudd. I didn't like him at first in this movie because I was like, what are you trying to do? Why are you overacting? Why are you being just weird? Why are you trying to stand out? I realized it was the character and the way that he was written. He is the grown-up version of Tommy Doyle, who is the kid that Laurie Strode was babysitting in the first movie. Right. Anyways, he's like this shut-in who's just obsessed with tracking down Michael Myers, and he's got a whole newspaper clipping wall about Michael Myers. He's recording every instance, and he's looking out the window. Like, he's a shut-in recluse looking for Michael Myers. And he's obviously gets on the trail that Michael Myers is back. I would like to, if I ever meet Paul Rudd, I'm going to ask about Halloween 6, because he's like, hey, let's talk about Anchorman instead. I feel like he would be that kind of person. But he didn't have a lot of good things to work with. And they really, really, really tried to bring back a lot of aspects of the original movie. Like the Strode family, like this time around, we're focusing on the cousin of Laurie Strode. Her dad was Laurie's dad's brother who sold him the Myers house because it wasn't selling. So we're focusing on his daughter, who was Laurie's cousin. And then her son, 8-year-old Danny, who is now hearing voices telling him to kill, like the voice man. He's hearing voices in the same way that apparently Michael was that night when he was 7 and killed his sister. So there's some kind of connection, some kind of driving force behind Danny, and he's like drawing the cult of Thorn symbols, and apparently that's the same driving force that was behind Michael when he was his age. Obviously, Dr. Loomis is retired at this point, and for good reason. He comes back when he catches wind of Jamie's demise, and kind of just gets roped in for one last ride, and he recognizes that Danny's voice is the same Michael had when he was a child. I'm struggling right now because it's just so everywhere, and it's because it went through production hell. There were so many scripts and so many ideas played with, and then even after that fact, after the cameras rolled, we got 2 different cuts of a movie, right? So as we've seen with the cinematic hallmark that is Zack Snyder's Justice League, the theatrical version and the original version, when you demolish the original version so far and try to remake it after the cameras had shut off, you're gonna get a mess. And that's what we got in this movie. So I'm really having a hard time differentiating in my mind what was cut and what wasn't, because it's just, I don't know. Are you struggling like I am? Because I'm struggling right now.
Yeah, there was a lot of plot points that they really tried to fit into this film, and a lot of different things that they tried to do, and it's just too many cooks in the kitchen. And just too much trying to go on, and they just really, they tried to go on this new route with, having, you know, this kid being, he can hear the same voices as Michael, but we don't need another Michael. We already have Michael, and there's just so many plot points in here that they really tried to make work, and they just don't make a lot of sense. And we can get things started, getting into the characters. So let's start with Michael. Obviously, Michael in this film, I don't like his character that they're going for, the way that they're trying to make him under this cult spell that explains why he does what he does. I'm okay with him, going after his family members. I'm okay with that. That's fine. But then when you start getting into, he's got the tattoo and he's controlled, and there's all these people in the cult, and it's just like, it's a little too much. So as far as Michael in the film, I like the mask. I've always liked the H6 mask. And to me, until we got the most recent films from the David Gordon Green trilogy, in the original films, he was the most brutal Michael, in my opinion, because he's pretty brutal in this film. He does a lot of killing, a lot of gory stuff that I do enjoy from him.
Yeah, you're you're absolutely right. I said last time the Halloween 5 mask was absolutely atrocious. They came back and they got, because this movie takes place like 7 or 6 years after Halloween 5. He's finally got a good mask. Like, the mask is very, very close to the original. It's dope. It's menacing. And I didn't know that. I said that my least favorite part about Halloween 4 was George P. Wilbur and the physical stature of him. He comes back. He's Michael in this movie, which is the first time the same person has ever played Michael twice. But he didn't seem small, like I pointed out last time. He seemed way bigger and way more menacing. I don't know if it was camera tricks or they got shorter actors and they learned. But yeah, no, I'm happy with the character design of Michael. I'm happy with that. And the filmmaking too, it's good. It's I think it's shot pretty well. The cinematography is good. It's more pleasing to look at than Halloween 5. And that's really it. But the story is just so bad that it takes away from the rest of it. But yeah, no, Michael's acted very well and designed very well, but and obviously he's concealed in shadows very well, and he's violent. But yeah, the whole direction with him, with the cult driving him again, is just a nightmare of a fan. Yeah, like, it's not good. And another thing too, this whole movie, I said it last time, how they were distancing themselves from the aesthetic of John Carpenter, and all the magic was kind of gone. This movie is so 90s, it's not even funny.
Oh man,
I don't know if it's because every time I see the Dimension logo, I think it's 2001 again. Yeah. But other than that, like, the new metal guitar for the score, and like the cyber box computers where he's looking up the cult of Thorn and the symbol, and the I don't know, and the radio, and the whole edgy aesthetic of the teenagers. It's just very Scream, very Final Destination. It has aged more poorly than the 1978 aesthetic, and I don't know why.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's a part of the reason that I don't like this movie as much as I used to, is it doesn't age well in terms of it is very 90s. Like, it feels like you you just woke up randomly one day and you were like, oh shit, Nirvana's popular, grunge, and okay, let's make a Halloween movie. And it's very, my biggest gripe about this film is the sound effect they do when there's always like a jump scare or there's a Michael coming out. It's like a knife, like that kind of noise. It just, man, it
gets old.
It gets old quick, and they do it a lot in this movie. And the way that they do edits and cuts in this film, they're super quick. They don't make sense. I mean, it's a mess in terms of actual filmmaking, from the process of using the camera and editing. And it did not do this film any favors at all.
The 80s, early 80s, the whole 80s was just a golden decade for horror films. It really was. the 90s was the dark decade for horror films because they got I want to go. If I ever invent a time machine, I'm going to go back to 1991 or 2, and I'm going to find whoever had the brilliant idea to make every horror film a comedy slasher movie, and I'm going to strangle him or her in their sleep. Because after Scream, after Child's Play 2, even a little bit of Final Destination, I don't remember if that was 90s or not, but there was just like Ghost of Mars, and just all the other, not even campy, just goofy, tongue-in-cheek, we don't care about this movie, like fun they were trying to have. It's such a horrible, horrible aesthetic. I hate every movie out of this era. And this came out in 95, right?
Yes, 95.
This was just catching like the beginning stages of that era that went into like 2005.
Yeah.
I hate that era. I hate it so much. And it gets worse with the Halloween franchise because there are installments that are coming up that are deeper in that era. But dude, the whole Scream, like meta, tongue in cheek, we know it's a horror movie, let's just have fun with it. Like, I hate that with a passion. I really, really do. And I would rather you take yourself way too seriously than take yourself not serious enough. And this movie was just starting to reek of that, and it really puts a bad taste in my mouth.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, this era they really started to go in a trend of not very good horror films for a long time. Really not until they made Scream, and Scream 1 was pretty good, but then after that, it kind of took another
After that,
dive.
beyond that, it was very like meta, a spoof of itself.
Scream, the first Scream did it right, and then it kind of got stale again after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very 90s, and not in the way that you would look fondly back on it. It was kind of a negative way that you would look back on it. It just feels like they're trying to be Halloween in the 90s as opposed to Halloween just simply taking place in the 90s, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So yeah, they didn't get that right. The editing's really, really bad. There's not a lot of characters that I really care about in this film. The final girl, Kara Strode, which they're really scraping for characters here because they live in the house, the old Myers house, which has changed again. It was the regular Myers house, then it was a castle, and then now it's like a 2-story regular house. It's weird. But you know, the character of the family, it's the brother of Laurie Strode's dad. They work for Strode Realty. They got the house cheap because of what happened. No one's going to live in the house. They don't even know about it. The dad's a total dick, which he does a good job at being a douche in this film. Yeah. He does have a cool kill at the end of the movie. But and then you've got the kid, Danny. You got Kara. She's the final girl. One of the weaker final girls, in my opinion. I think she's a fine actor, but she doesn't really have much to do other than just kind of run around. Yeah, and the characters, there's just not a lot. I do like Paul Rudd in this film. You know, he's the weird, creepy Tommy Doyle guy, but he comes off in a way like it's I'm not gonna say it's believable, but it's kind of funny, but you kind of believe him at the same time that he's kind of had this stuff happen to him. And this is before he really blew up, so no one really knew who Paul Rudd was. And then you got Loomis. This is his last appearance in the film, in the series, because unfortunately, after this was done filming, he passed away. So, and you can tell at this point, I mean, he's really old. And you know, he's good for what he is. He says a couple good lines, a couple parts here and there for his age, but for the most part, there are no characters in this film that I really give a damn about. I don't.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said last time about like the victim 1, victim 2. Here's the new girl for this installment. Like, whatever, you know. The only people I care about are the legacy characters, and that's because they're the only ones with any kind of depth, other than running across the street a couple times. And even Loomis was just. In Halloween 5, I didn't like Loomis because he was very cynical. He was very like off-putting. Mm-hmm. This movie, he just wasn't even in it. He just wasn't even there. Like, he just was only there just to say that he was there. And he didn't get the good send-off that he deserved. It's such a legendary actor, such a shame. You know, the producer's cut,
I believe, had like a final showdown between him and Michael, at least to some extent. But the theatrical cut that you're going to see of this movie, him and Michael, when was the last time they saw face to face in this movie? Do you remember? Because it definitely wasn't the ending.
Well, I honestly don't know. I don't think they ever really like come across each other. And I can't remember I know they do in the producer's cut, they see each other more, but in the theatrical cut, they don't. We'll get to the ending of the theatrical and then we'll talk about the producer's cut as well. But yeah, there's really not a lot of Loomis in the theatrical cut. If I'll put it to you like this, if you want to see more Loomis, then you should watch the producer's cut. There are more scenes with him in there.
At this point, I think you should watch the producer's cut anyways. I mean, it's not going to save the film, but you'll see what they were going for at least.
Correct. So just to get this out there, the theatrical cut, they try to do the Thorn Cult of Thorn storyline, but they don't like go all in on it. They just kind of mention it and then stuff happens. If you want that full on like storyline, you're like, at this point, I don't care, just explain it all. Then I would watch the producer's cut, because then it really goes into the thick of the Cult of Thorn and kind of how it works. So, it's a kind of choose your own adventure. Either one really isn't that great, but if you want to go down that route, you can.
Yeah, they made the producer's cut with the whole cult and the sacrificial chamber scene where they're laying on the sacrifice bed and the Loomis ending up with the twist at the end. They made that. Test audiences didn't like it. They went back to the cutting room floor. At this point, Donald Pleasance had passed away, so they couldn't reshoot any Loomis scenes. So they had to just come up with this ending of they were trying to like change it last minute into like this sci-fi science experiment route where there was like fetuses and DNA structures in this lab room. And that's where Paul Rudd and the final girl show down with Michael Myers and they stab him with a sedative or some weird thing that was never explained. Very obviously reshot ending to get away from the cult aspect of it. But at this point, you can't change it. Like it's weaved throughout the whole story. You can forget about it the entire third act. You set up for it. You know what I mean? So without reshooting the entire movie, you have to address it somehow. You might as well just double down and watch the producer's cut so you can see what they were getting at and get the cult in all their infamous glory. And it's not good. That's it. Like I'm struggling, man. It's not good.
It's not good. There's so many bad things in this film. So and then they have it, and what makes it really 90s to me is you basically have a Howard Stern ripoff of Barry Sims, the character, and they're all listening to the radio and he's doing this like Michael Myers theme segment and people are calling in. The one lady's like, I want to know what it's like. I'm so attracted to Michael. I want to know what's behind the mask. I'm like, well, no, you're going to die. Is that what you're saying? And then, so to kind of get back on track with the movie. So Jamie escapes with her baby. One of the nurses like kind of helps her out and is like, here's your baby, run away. And then, Michael shows up in the film for his first time and he's chasing after Jamie. And she takes this construction worker's truck and drives off and Michael's chasing behind her in a car. Michael Myers, he loves to fucking drive. I tell you what. So they get to this bus stop area and Jamie is hiding down there. And all of a sudden Michael comes in. Essentially what she does is she hides the baby, like in one of the cabinets in the bathroom, and then Michael is oblivious to that and she escapes. So she's chasing after him, and while she's in there she can hear the radio show I'm talking about. It's playing in the bus station, and of course there's no one there in this bus station. It's dead. And she steps in there and she calls on the phone to the show and she's like, Michael Myers is after me, and no one believes her. But then you have Tommy Doyle listening to it. You have Dr. Loomis and Dr. Wynn, who are together, they're listening to it, so everyone's hearing this and they're kind of getting tipped off that Michael might be back. And we get to this point where, there's more chasing going on. Jamie drives off, gets hit by Michael in the car, drives off into this barn area, and she's hiding from him. And I will say that as bad as this film is, there are some pretty damn good kills. And that kill where he throws her on the corn thresher and turns that thing on, I like that kill. That's pretty gruesome.
Yeah, it really is. And killing the guy whose truck it was in the beginning, like snapping his neck, that was part of the reshoots to make it more bloody and more like practical effects. Yeah, the kills are good, man. They're gory and they're really over the top. They're not campy like the last movie. They're definitely more horror oriented.
Correct.
So yeah, I will give the kills at some points as it relates to Michael's threat level. But yeah, every time I say something good about this movie, I got 3 other bad things to say about it, man. It's tough. I'm trying so hard to be fair, but the whole baby thing was part of the producer's cut, where it was like, take this innocent life as a sacrifice in the cult ritual chamber. But in the theatrical cut, the baby kind of just had no point, And in the producer's cut, I can see where they cut this. It was revealed that the baby of Jamie was Michael Myers' baby.
Yes. And what does that mean? What does that mean?
You say, wait a minute, wasn't Jamie his niece? And to that I say, yes, he was.
Yeah. So if you don't see what we're saying there, essentially Michael Myers, it's not implied if he raped her or if they just took his seed and put it in her, and that's all I'm going to say there. Either way, it's pretty gross and it's terrible. Yeah, and it's bad. It's so bad. The cult is one thing, but then having the kid with the incest kid, it's just like that's not going to work for me, movie.
Yeah, it's not. I'm glad that was reshot, but again, it just goes back to the writing and just this outlandishness. That just, it's no wonder it was rebooted not long after. Let's just put it that way, because I mean, it's done. The franchise is done at this point. You have no option but to reboot it.
Correct. Which in the next film they do with H2O, they do reboot the timeline. One of the first reboots of this timeline, one of the many reboots that we get in this franchise. Yeah. But so we get to this point, and then Michael kills Jamie. She's dead, and her last words to him is, "Michael, you can't have the baby." And that pisses him off, and he turns on that machine and starts cutting her up and all this stuff. And Michael goes to the truck thinking the baby's going to be there. Turns out it's a roll of paper towels. She faked them out.
It was supposed to be the baby, but it was paper towels.
Faked them out. Michael Myers, you aren't that smart. I tell you what. So at this point, we get introduced to the family that's living in the Strode house. We got John Strode, whatever his name is. He's a total dick. You get the mom. She's just trying to help out her daughter. Her daughter Kara just moved back into the house. She's had a rough couple years. She's moved back in with her kid Danny, and then you've got her brother Tim or cousin whoever that also lives in the house. So, and in typical 90s fashion, domestic violence is very much allowed in this film, because they're arguing. He just gets up and slaps the shit out of her, and he is like, "Everything was good before you got here. You suck. You're taking all my money." And everyone's just like, God, can this guy get killed already?
He wasn't killed until the end, wasn't he?
It was near the end of the film, kind of midway to the end. He does have a good kill, which we'll get there.
Yeah, he does.
So Tommy Doyle lives across the street. And if you don't know Tommy Doyle, Paul Rudd plays him in the film. He is supposed to be the kid that was Lori was babysitting at the end of the first film. Okay, that's fine. Nice little tie in there, what they did. That's okay. Plus, you got Paul Rudd. He's meant to be this creepy, like, stalker kid across the street who's, the whole thing with Michael traumatized him. And, he ends up going to the bus station. He ends up reviewing the tape where Jamie called. He's like, I know she's at the bus station. So he goes there. And one of my favorite scenes in the film, even though it's terrible, it's so bad I love it. He goes and sits in the little booth where she made the phone call. He just looks down and he's like, "Oh, there's a trail of blood," and it just follows it all the way to the bathroom. I'm like, at this point, the bus station's crowded full of people. Not one person saw blood leading to the bathroom until Tommy Doyle got there. And he was like, "Oh, hey, by the way, there's a kid down here too."
Look, I've never been in a bus station like that. I imagine there's a couple trails of blood, but how many of them lead to a baby in a cabinet? Someone's got to call that out, right?
Yeah, that was one of those that's so bad it's good to me. So Paul Rudd goes down there, he finds this kid, and I love how the whole time until she puts him up, the baby never cries at all. Even when Michael was down there, the baby never makes a peep. Then Paul Rudd just comes down there and all of a sudden it starts crying. And maybe the baby was
Paul Rudd.
Maybe the baby fell asleep or something. I don't know. I'll go with that. So Paul Rudd picks up this baby. He's walking around with it. And then he goes like to the hospital and he's like, I need to see a doctor. And they're like, this dude's crazy. All of a sudden he runs into Dr. Loomis and they start talking. And then Paul Rudd just runs out of the hospital with this baby and no one chases after him. Like this crazy guy's running around with his kid. He probably shouldn't have a kid.
Yeah. What a crazy chain of coincidences just to get them together. And he says, Dr. Loomis, meet me at the town rally tonight. One thing we didn't touch on, Halloween had been outlawed in Haddonfield since all this went down. And the town rally is about getting Halloween back on track for Haddonfield. That was one of the many plot points thrown around in all these screenplays that were offered up for number 6 that they kept. Lots of different iterations. I guess this theme was kept and wasn't really expanded upon in this movie. A fun fact, another sequence of Paul Rudd or somebody listening to the radio, and one of the callers says something about sending Michael into space. And the radio is like, Michael Myers in space? That's ridiculous. Next. That's a little knock because before this movie, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were trying to sue to get the rights back to bring Halloween back to New Line Cinema with them.
Mm-hmm.
And John Carpenter's idea for the next installment was to send Michael Myers to space. So that was a nice little jab right there. I like that. I kind of respected that joke. That was pretty funny.
I also like how a few years later we got Jason in space.
Yeah, the 90s love their space, don't they?
So I remember that. That's cool. I didn't know the whole part about them wanting to go to space. I didn't know that. I will tell you my favorite factoid about this film, because I do. That's my favorite part about doing these reviews. I love little facts. So the girl Beth, that is Tim's boyfriend, the one that dresses up as Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Yeah. And they're trying to get Halloween uncanceled. They're like, Michael Myers is dead. He's not dead, or he is dead. We need to bring back Halloween. Alice in Chains is my favorite band of all time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That girl, she is on the album cover of their famous album, Dirt. If you go and look up 1992's Dirt by Alice in Chains, the girl that's laying in the dirt, that's her.
Dude, the most 90s Halloween movie of all time.
Yes, it's true.
Wow.
And it's true. Look it up. I didn't believe it, but it is true. So
that's cute. I like that.
So I give 1 point to this film for having an Alice in Chains nod in here, because I love that movie, or I love that band, not the movie. So at this point, there's just stuff happening, and Michael, he's showing up, and he does have a pretty cool kill where he shows up, and Dr. Loomis, he's trying to warn the lady that's living in the house she's like, hey, you need to get your family out of here. This is Myers' old house. Like, you need to get out of here. And then she calls her husband and she's like, you moved us in here and you never told us. And he's like, screw you, Deborah, you don't know shit, and blah blah blah. Anyway, Michael ends up showing up, and there's a scene where she's running in the backyard behind these like bed sheets that are in the back drying, and she trips and falls and ruins her glasses. She looks up and she sees Michael. Michael just with the axe gets her all over the bed sheets. I do love that kill. That's a good kill. I like it.
Yeah, the bed sheets obviously is a nice little nod to the first one of many nods that they make. And then not long after that, I think her husband comes home, right?
Not so, yeah, a little bit longer down the road. It's nighttime. He comes home. At this point, Tommy Doyle has told Kara, is like, you need to come to my house, like that your house isn't safe. And she's like, okay, but you're kind of weird. I'll go anyway. And so they're over there. No one's at the Myers house except whenever John comes home late at night, and he's drunk and he's like, where's my dinner? Oh, she really left. Okay, whatever. And then the lights go off, and then he hears something going on in the basement. He thinks he hears the washing machine. He goes downstairs. He's like, how can the washing machine be on? The power's off. And basically he stops it, opens it up. There's bloody sheets. And he's like, oh my God. He turns around. Michael's there. And in my favorite kill in this movie, he picks him up with the knife, throws him on top of the electrical box, and electrocutes him. And then his head explodes everywhere. It's great. I would have loved to see how they did that and how they pulled that off. They just put all this stuff and just blew it up. That'd have been so cool to be there for that.
That was that and the neck breaking at the beginning of the driver. Those were practical effects that were added in after the fact to ramp up the gore factor. I don't remember who I was watching, but I was watching somebody talk about this movie, and they brought up a good point. This is about the point where you start rooting for Michael Myers.
Yes.
Like, yeah, get him, like, kill him, and that's not something you ever are supposed to do. Like, you root for Jason to kill these obnoxious teenagers. You root for Freddy Krueger to haunt the dreams of these teenagers. You root for Ghostface to make an appearance and check off the list of who it might be, whatever, But Michael Myers is not a horror icon that you root for like the other ones. And that's what makes him scary, But in this movie, you start rooting for him. Like, yeah, kill that dad. Make his head explode with electricity. Like, wait a minute, what did I just say? That's stupid.
Yeah.
And
when you get to the point,
I'd never thought about it that way, but that's a big problem.
It is. And when you get to the point where you start rooting for your horror villain, like, yes, it makes sense for you because you're a fan and you like it. But on the broad spectrum of things, you shouldn't be rooting for him because you're supposed to be invested in the story and know that he is bad, the other person is good, and we're supposed to be rooting for the good person. When you start rooting for the bad person, that's when you've kind of lost the audience in terms of the story.
It's not clever. It just gets you more sequels and that are just gore porn and nothing else. It's just
correct.
This isn't Saw. You're not trying to see how people die. Like,
same thing that happened.
That's the idea.
Same thing that happened with The Nightmare on Elm Street after the second or third film. Freddy started to become this Hollywood star and jokester, and you're rooting for him. You're not rooting against him, and he's no longer scary. And he just, you're kind of like, oh, I want to see Freddy like make some jokes and kill people, and that's kind of what happens. So yeah. Anyways, getting on with this film, they get to this point where the boyfriend and girlfriend, they come home to the Myers house and there's no one there. And then of course you got to have your sex scene in there. So they're doing their thing. And then he goes and takes a shower. And then across the street is Kara. She's looking out the window and she's calls over there and she's like, why are you guys over there? You need to get out of the house. She's like, what's going on? And then Michael shows up and he stabs him, and you get the terrible 90s sound effect and the cuts, the shing, shing, shing. Oh God, it's so bad. And then all of a sudden she sees her son walking across the street to go to the Myers house to go and like see Michael. So she runs over there and she gets him out, and then they're on this chase scene. And then you hear the most like royalty free 90s riff, like it's like running.
Yeah.
They introduce a lot of rock in this film. Now, I get it. Grunge music is like 90s at its peak at this era, or it's dying down. 90s music rock is still on top, but man, it just does not work in this movie. It does not work. It might have worked in 95, but not watching it again.
And it's not even rock music. Like, it's one thing to like really just overindulge yourself in whatever the hot rock song of the year is. Like, if you're gonna play Alice in Chains, or you're gonna play Nirvana, or you're gonna play some old school Foo Fighters or whatever, like that's really gonna date your movie. But that's not even music. It's like you said, the royalty free. It's like some producer's son can play guitar, and they're like, all right, give us a 3-second thing, and that's what they got. It's just stupid. It's just so dumb. Like the score is so timeless. Why would you mess with it?
Yeah, and in all the other films, they kind of do their own version of the original score, but they keep it simplistic. They add some stuff here and there that you might like, you might not like, but to have this with like the whole rock and the whole like the whole 90s thing, it does not work. This is the first time in the franchise of all the scores that I really did not like. Even if I don't like the other films, the scores are still okay to me. This film, no, I didn't like it.
Yeah, it's ugly. It's just ugly. So we get to the house, and it's finally, the twist is revealed. Dr. Wynn, Loomis's friend, the doctor, was the man in black the whole time.
He was the man in black. And you know what? How could you not have seen it? Because he was only in the first film for about 30 seconds, and that was it.
Yeah.
Again,
it's like,
said,
this legacy character, that's the guy. That's the twist.
I guarantee you, no one other than when you were in that theater in 1995, if you were there, other than the apps, and this is like pre-internet, like internet was just like becoming like a mainstream thing. If you were not an absolute diehard Halloween fan that had just watched all the VHSs and been in like a fan club and researched it with other people, because the internet, you couldn't go on internet forums really and all that stuff back then. Only the 0.1 percentile of diehard fans would have been like, oh, that's Dr. Wynn from the first film. I knew it. No one else would have known that. Anyone else in the whole film would have been like, in the audience would have been like, okay, that's the guy that was in the film earlier, but what okay, that's weird. Like, no one else knows who that is.
Yeah, exactly. And you have numbers 4 and 5. Like, if you brought back one of those characters, okay, like if you brought back, like, it would make even less sense. But if you brought back like Sheriff Brackett, or like Brady from number 4, or even like Sheriff Beaker, or what, you bring back somebody who's had a little bit more screen time, maybe would have had more of an impact. But you're really milking the first movie. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, and you're just trying to tie it in, and it's such an insignificant character that it doesn't work. And then at the same time, I even heard rumors that they were thinking about making it Michael Myers' dad. That would have been even better than this. I mean, it still would have sucked, but it would have been better than a guy that was in the first film for about a minute.
At this point, I'd take anything. And Michael Myers' dad, even if you went the route of Dr. Wynn was Michael Myers' dad the whole time and had him admitted under his supervision, that would have been a little bit more impactful. Like, if you're going to be this ridiculous and this egregious with the storyline, dude, just go balls to the wall.
Yeah.
Do Jason X again, but the doctor being his dad would be good. If it was just his dad and not even Dr. Wynn, it would be good. But it being this 30-second spoken line character from the first one is it's nothing more than fan service. And this movie is not even the worst offender with the fan service. We'll get to it, but it's just so nothing. That's just is what it is. It had no impact.
Yeah, it was a big nothing burger, and it did nothing for me. And I'm sure it did nothing for anyone that saw this movie in theaters. So at this point, it's announced that Dr. Wynn is the man in black. And throughout this film, he's been trying to get Dr. Loomis to come back to Smith's Grove. And I'm like, why do you want him to come back? He's almost 80 years old. He's probably going to pass away soon, but I get why they're trying to bring him back. But we get to this point where the cult shows up and they take Kara, and for some reason they drug Tommy and Dr. Loomis. You got to why didn't they just kill him or take him with them? But no, they just drugged them so they could let them come back and ruin their plan. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I always wondered that. It's like, why are they still like just acting like nothing happened? They're like, oh, we just got drugged. Okay, now we're gonna continue on with the movie.
Like, you're so quick to kill off anyone who's not a main character. Like, we see what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, pull a Game of Thrones. Like, anybody can get it. You have no idea who's going to die next, but you just know that the main three aren't going to die. You know, even at this point, if they killed Dr. Loomis, I'd be okay with it. You know, but they just don't. You know?
Yeah. At this point, you know, I mean, when they're filming, they don't know he's going to pass away. But I mean, at this point, he's so old. I mean, he probably this was going to be his last movie anyway. So if you're going to do something crazy, do that. But
yeah,
no, they didn't do that. So at this point, they're going to Smith's Grove to find Michael, find the baby, because the baby still exists in this film. Steven is his name, by the way. So they go, and you know, I keep saying this every time, but I have to go back. This is my favorite kill in the whole movie. Not the head explosion part. I like that one, but this one's my favorite, where Michael, they're all the doctors are like in there and they're getting ready to do some sort of surgery or do something. And all of a sudden Michael just shows up and he walks in. I think at this point, he kind of just like says, okay, screw this curse. I don't care anymore. This plot line is stupid. I'm going back to killing people. This man picks up like this, like mini, like butcher knife and just walks in and just destroys everybody. Now the editing in this thing, it makes you want to have a seizure. I mean, seriously, like it's like flashing and it's crazy, but he kills like 15 people in this thing. And then all of a sudden they pick up the kid, they pick up the baby and the kid, and then they run, and then Michael is chasing after him. And this is the first time in the franchise, if you pay attention, Michael runs down that that hallway. He runs.
Dude, he was hustling, and that, if used correctly, seeing Michael run would kind of feel like seeing Batman cry. You know, it would have such an impact because it's so just against him. You feel the emotional and the urgency like behind it. It to see Michael Myers run, that's when you know shit's getting real, you know. But they don't use it in the good context here. Like any other movie, if he ran, you would know that he's under pressure and he's sweating under there. But no, he runs down the hallway in this movie for no reason other than to catch his next victim.
Yeah, there's a doctor that escapes that's in front of him, and he's like running after him, and then he's also running after Tommy and all of them. So at that point, you know, we get to the final showdown. They kind of hide in this room, and Michael comes in, and it's Kara, Tommy, the baby Steven, and Danny, the little kid, and they're all hiding. And pretty much Tommy kind of tricks him, and he's like, "Hey, Michael, like I'm over here." And then Michael's looking at him, he's like, "Hey," and then he walks over there, and he looks at him. And I think, as much as I don't like this movie, the lighting in the scene of the mask looks really good. This really makes you appreciate the mask. They do a good job there. And then he kind of tricks him, and all of a sudden he takes all these syringes with like some kind of tranquilizer or something and stabs it into Michael. And Michael he just kind of goes like, I don't care. It does not affect him at all. And all of a sudden, you know, he starts fighting Tommy, and then he starts choking Kara, and then he's going after the kid with the baby, and then he gets stabbed again. And all of a sudden, Loomis shows up and kind of helps him out. And then Tommy Doyle just is like, you know, I've had enough. And then he just starts beating the hell out of him with his pipe. And, you know, I've seen Michael Myers get taken down by gunshots, by dynamite, by fire, but he just gets beaten down with a pipe. And that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And that's because the third act was rewritten and reshot to get rid of the whole cult ending that the test audiences didn't like. It's It sucks. I mean, there's no other way around it. There's no impact. There's no sweet revenge story between Tommy Doyle and Michael Myers. There's no closing of the gap with what the hell the baby was about. There's no like Laurie Strode final showdown with the girl, and it's just, and there's not even a Michael versus Loomis showdown in this movie. It's just so it's just so like, why set something up as early as the first act of number 5 if you're just gonna tuck your tail and run away at the first sign of negative reviews by the third act of the 6th movie? It's just, it doesn't.
So,
It's
yeah,
bad.
and
I want to know who's behind this, and I want to tell them that they're bad.
well, go on Wikipedia; it'll tell you. um, and I can even get behind him getting beaten with the pipe. But what kills me, and this is a classic horror trope, but for someone like Tommy, who he saw what happened in the first film when he was a kid, that you can't kill him. You have to do everything you can. He hits him probably 10 times with this pipe, and then he just throws it on the ground and walks away. He's like, okay, I'm done. Dude, if that was me, I would have not stopped with that pipe until literally he was disintegrated into dust.
Until his head was pulled on the floor. Why are you stopping? Why does anybody stop in these movies before dismembering him, cutting his hands off, getting messy, making sure he's dead, taking off the mask? Why does nobody do this?
It doesn't make any sense, and I understand why they don't do it, but in terms of being logical, it's not written in a good way. I mean, everyone at this point knows Michael is pretty much like supernatural, but even if Tommy Doyle was there and he was like, I sawed all of Michael's body parts off, and then all of a sudden the next sequel he's back and it was like his joints came back together, at least you would know, like, okay, we literally cannot kill this guy, like he's a ghost, like there's nothing we can do. But you can't know for certain, because every time you get on the brink of killing him, they stop.
Exactly. The writers with the final showdown, they pull their punches because they want to leave the door open for another sequel, which I'm sure the studio is telling them, don't kill Michael Myers. But still, at 6 movies in, 5 movies in, tired of it. I need some kind of closure, and there's no closure in this movie. This is supposed to be the end of the Thorn trilogy. There's no closure at all, and I think that's just a big deal. And with the theatrical cut, there's a cliff ending where Paul Rudd and them get out, and Loomis goes back into the room, or Loomis goes back into Smith's Grove, and it's a shot of Michael's mask on the floor, and you hear screaming, and that's it. That's the end of the movie. Like, Michael escaped.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the 2 endings. So like you said, in the theatrical cut, you get Loomis, pretty much saying like, I have unfinished business. So he goes back in there, you get this shot, Michael's mask is laying on the ground, you just hear Loomis go, no, like it's implied that it can be interpreted a couple different ways, that Michael killed Loomis, or Loomis came and he saw Michael was gone, so he freaked out, or there's different ways that people interpret it. And then in the producer's cut, the ending is essentially Tommy stops Michael by putting him in this ring of like runes around him, and once he gets in the circle, the forces like stop him from moving. He can't do anything. And then we get kind of the same ending, but at the end, Dr. Loomis walks down the hallway and sees Michael laying down there in the room. So he takes his mask off for it to be Dr. Wynn, and then he looks at his wrist, and now he has the Cult of Thorn. And then you get this cutaway where you see who is presumed to be Michael dressed up in Dr. Wynn's costume, walking away into the night. So either way, it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad either way. There's just no redeeming it. This is one of the few examples of the director or the producer's cut doesn't even salvage a bad screenplay. And usually I'm all for, like, if there's a theatrical versus a director's cut, always go with the director's cut. But this time it's a lose-lose situation. At least with the director or producer's cut in this case, at least you have a little bit more fun with it, I guess. It's just not as ham-handed and thrown together. But here's the problem. I can't blame any one person. This is a bad story, man. This is bad. No good acting, no good cinematography can save this. This is a mess, and it needs to stop.
You know what's crazy to think about is that at least a lot of people don't like 5. I liked it for the first time in a long time, but even if you don't like 5, at least you can say, you know what? They did it 1 year after number 4. That's it. They had 1 year and they turned this thing around. That's a quick turnaround to make a good story. This film is 5 years or 6 years, 5 or 6 years after. No, it's 6 years. 6 years after number 5. You had 6 years to come up with something, and this is what we got. That let alone tells you that they had nothing left.
Yeah, it was a mess. There was development hell. No one could agree on anything. They were burnt out. Everyone was burnt out. Donald Pleasance was at the end of his career. They just didn't know what to do. They wrote themselves into a corner with the last movie, and they shouldn't have done that without more of a stable backing. And it's just there was no room for another, like a 7th movie. There's nothing. There's nothing after this. You have no option but to try again from square one.
True. And that is essentially kind of what we get, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. So that is essentially the end of Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. That is the end of the Thorn Trilogy, if you want to call it that. So let's talk about grades. We do it after every movie. Jeff, what is your grade for Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers?
Look, I like Michael in this movie. I like how much of a threat he is again after being kind of a goofball the last 2 movies. It's shot and it's visually a little more pleasing than number 5. Gun to my head, and that is the only situation in which I would ever watch this movie. And I have to choose between 5 and 6. I'm gonna choose 6 just because it's a little easier to watch. But the story is so horrendous. It's just like it's infamously bad. I feel like if you're gonna watch it, go with the producer's cut just to go double down and get the whole ridiculous cult nonsense rather than a half-ass like, oh, forget the cult thing from the first half of the movie. Like, just go with that. There's really nothing else redeeming about this movie. Still not the worst in the series. Still not the worst Halloween movie of all time. Surprisingly.
So you're still holding out. Still not the worst.
I'm holding out. We haven't got there yet. We are damn close. They are damn close. This is bottom 3 for sure. I gave Halloween 5 a flat D because I didn't like watching it. I'm gonna give 2 grades for this one. The theatrical cut of this, I'm gonna give a D- just because it makes no sense. The producer's cut, as ridiculous as it is, I'm gonna give a flat D as well. A flat D for 5, a flat D for the producer's cut of this one. Gun to my head, I'm gonna watch 6 over 5, but I'm not gonna watch 6 over anything else. Yeah, flat D, no better.
So it really pains me to say this because for the longest time, I really did. This was my guilty pleasure Halloween film that I know no one likes, but I still had a gravitas towards it because I think it's because I saw it a lot when I was a kid. And this version of Michael really scared me when I was a kid. As I've gotten older, obviously, and I understand, what makes a good movie, what doesn't, it's a lot harder to defend. So, I love Michael in this film, his mask and the way he works. However, that's about the only thing I like Paul Rudd in the film too, but it's not enough. I'm going to have to go with a D- as well I would say for both, because I would even give it a lower score if I really was focusing on the producer's cut, because I don't like the cult stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go D- as well for both of them combined. Give me a D- for Halloween 6.
D-, at least, I guess at least it's not an F. We'll get there. Do you have an F in the tank? Do you feel there's an F coming?
I don't know. It's close. I think we all know what we're talking about, but
We do.
like I said, I'm gonna watch it again. Maybe I'll have a turnaround, man. I never liked Halloween 5 until I watched it this time, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I ever have. So I don't think I'll get that far, but you never know.
Never say never, especially with Halloween, I guess.
Never say never. So at this point, the Thorn Trilogy is over. We're 6 films down. Our next movie is Halloween H2O, which I think is super controversial in the series because I think a lot of people either really love this movie or a lot of people strongly dislike this movie. And I'm not going to tell you where I'm at because I want to watch it again just to make sure. But any quick tidbits on H2O that you want to say before we review that film?
I'm excited to watch H2O. That's another one I haven't watched since the VHS and AMC Fear Fest days in the early 2000s, man. But I do remember watching it and liking it as a kid, probably just because it was more action packed and that's all you care about as a kid. But now I'm excited to watch it. I'm deeply interested in watching it because I haven't watched H2O with my fully developed, cinema fanatic brain yet. So I'm interested in watching it, man, and seeing and kind of taking a step back and seeing where we were with that major retcon, and just seeing how it played out, especially now that I watched the trilogy that people didn't like. So I'm excited. I have high hopes for it. I have good expectations for it. I have a gut feeling that I'm gonna like it better. But I'm open to anything.
When I first watched it, the first couple of times, I really enjoyed it. I will say, as I have watched it more, I have not liked it as much. I won't reveal why until we get to the film. However, we'll get there. So thank you guys for tuning in to Every Horror Film Where Horror Is Forever. If you made it this far, why not go a little bit further? We're going to part 7, Halloween H2O. And we will see you guys on the next one.
The mummy has now been located.
The living mummy. The living mummy.
Bullets won't stop.
Some creature out of time.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
He's completely out of control.
I saw those bodies.
Is he a man or a monster?
You actually knew a werewolf in a peaceful town where nothing ever happened.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
In the mystical regions of Transylvania.